Welcome to Trending Unpacked, the show where we explore the stories behind the trends shaping our world. Today, we're zoning in on something that, well, it wasn't just a trend, it felt more like a societal shiver going around. This whole phenomenon known simply as the perfect neighbor.
Yeah, it really captured something, didn't it? And it wasn't just, a funny meme or a quick hashtag.
Yeah.
By late 2025, especially after that huge spike in October, this whole narrative format just became inescapable. It really crystallized this tension, this high-stakes gap between the perfect image someone puts out there and the often really dark, sometimes even criminal truth hidden away.
That October moment was something else. Suddenly, the perfect neighbor wasn't just a phrase you hear in, true crime circles. It was everywhere. TikTok, Reddit, news headlines. It became shorthand.
Yeah.
And it seems like it was driven by that confluence of events, that big Netflix docudrama about the seemingly perfect town with a secret.
Oh, yeah, that one landed hard.
And at the same time, you had all these TikTok storytime videos popping off, people sharing their own, sometimes chilling experiences with neighbors who weren't what they seemed.
Exactly. And what was fascinating, I think, was how fast the conversation shifted. It quickly moved beyond just the details of specific cases, didn't it? It stopped being just about, oh, look at this terrible crime, and started becoming about, well, about us, our own fears, our own maybe willingness to overlook things.
Which really brings us to what we want to explore today. We want to unpack the psychology behind this obsession. Why do these stories about the darkness hiding behind the perfectly ordinary, the neighbor who always waves, has the best lawn, maybe even brings over cookies, why do they grip us so much? What is it about the idea that real danger could be living right there next door, smiling at us?
Well, I think it's because it fundamentally challenges one of the maybe last sort of unspoken social rules we rely on, which is that idea of safety being tied to, familiarity and proximity. If someone's close, if they look right, they should be safe. This trend just blows that apart.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit more. When we talk about the perfect neighbor in this trending context, what are we actually defining? What makes this archetype tick?
It's really rooted in deception, obviously, but it's deception as a performance art, almost. The archetype isn't just someone who seems normal. They often present as actively exemplary, like model citizens.
Right. Not just blending in, but standing out in a good way.
Exactly. They might be super involved, head of the homeowners association, always volunteering, the house that wins the holiday decoration contest every year. They use that outward perfection, that sort of hyper normalcy to actively deflect suspicion, and then bam, it comes out they've been hiding something huge.
And the sources we looked at really emphasize the scale of these secrets. That's part of the intensity, isn't it? We're not just talking about someone, secretly hating their neighbor's dog or something minor. Yeah.
Oh, no, definitely not. The stories that went viral, the ones that fuel this, they involved serious stuff. Major criminal acts, sometimes discovered years later. Huge white-collar fraud schemes run from a suburban basement. People living entire double lives, maybe with hidden families or identities. And when that shatters, it often causes real trauma in the community.
The complexity seems key. Like those examples that kept popping up, the suburban disappearances where the helpful neighbor was the last person seen with the victim.
The one who seemed too eager to help the search party.
Or those big fraud cases where it turns out the, super trusted treasurer of the local charity was embezzling everything.
Right. And the stalker stories were particularly chilling, I think.
Yeah.
The ones where the person realized the threat wasn't some anonymous online figure, but the friendly guy next door who waved every morning. That really drove the fear home.
So the power really comes from that massive psychological gap then. You have the comfort zone, the nice yard, the polite hellos, the feeling of predictability. That's the appearance. And then suddenly you're faced with this shocking, pervasive danger. That's the reality. That gulf between the two, that's like rocket fuel for viral content, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the tension point, it directly attacks the implicit social contract we have, especially in places like suburbs or planned communities. There's this assumption, often unconscious, that if a neighborhood looks uniform, if it looks orderly, then the people in it must also be, morally orderly, predictable, safe.
We sort of buy into the aesthetics, meaning something deeper.
We do. We buy a house partly based on the feeling of the neighborhood. And when a neighbor who perfectly embodies that ideal is revealed as something dangerous, it just collapses that whole sense of security we thought we bought into.
And the sources mention how this trend didn't just stay as passive watching. It really ignited debates, especially on places like Reddit. People weren't just talking about the crimes, they were suddenly questioning trust itself. Like, who can you trust if the person who looks the safest is actually the threat?
Exactly. It brought up all these thorny questions about privacy versus, well, community safety. Is maintaining that perfect private facade an absolute right? Or does the community have some kind of I don't know, obligation maybe to notice when something seems too perfect, too aggressively curated.
That feels like a direct challenge to the whole suburban dream narrative.
It is, because that narrative, as reports confirmed, heavily relies on this implicit promise.
Hmm.
Safety through aesthetics, safety through geography. Quiet street equals safe street. Nice house equals nice person.
It's like a visual shorthand for security. If everything looks clean and orderly and, frankly, a bit boring,
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of wired to relax. So when the perfect neighbor story breaks that pattern, it's terrifying because it means the visual cues are worthless, or worse, they're camouflage.
Right. The very things that are supposed to signal safety might actually be the tools of deception. And the social commentary around the trend really picked up on this. Sources pointed to it reflecting two big modern issues. First, this sense of modern loneliness. We live packed together, closer than ever physically, but often quite emotionally isolated.
Close enough to borrow sugar, but not close enough to notice someone's living a complete lie.
Precisely. Those polite, surface-level interactions, the little scripts we follow, they actually provide excellent cover for someone who wants to hide something. There's no depth being probed.
And the second issue.
What gets called facade culture, which, we mostly associate with social media carefully curating our lives online, showing only the highlights. The perfect neighbor archetype basically takes that online performance offline. They turn their entire life, their home, their interactions, into a physical performance of perfection. It's not genuine calm. It's an active, ongoing concealment strategy.
So if we're already primed by digital culture to see perfection as something curated and maybe fake,
Then when we see that seemingly effortless perfection in the real world, the always perfect garden, the spotless car, the unnervingly calm demeanor, it starts to feel suspicious. The trend almost inadvertently teaches us to be distrustful of the very quietness and orderliness that suburbs promise. We start projecting our digital skepticism onto our actual neighbors.
that inherent distrust. That leads us straight into how people started interpreting this, right? It moved beyond just recounting the stories. The perfect neighbor became more than just a news item. It felt like it solidified into a kind of psychological archetype.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. You could call it the archetype of the hidden threat. Symbolically, this figure represents that repressed tension in society. He kind of validates that nagging feeling that maybe things aren't as nice and tidy as they look. It suggests that beneath the surface of everyday politeness and social distance, the darker parts of human nature don't just vanish. They just get better at hiding, using the very symbols of success and stability, like a perfectly trimmed hedge, becoming a metaphor for well-kept secrets.
And the digital world is just perfectly set up to feed our curiosity about this, isn't it? The sources talked a lot about digital voyeurism spiking around these stories.
Oh, absolutely. Social media's engine runs on our fascination with other people's lives, especially private lives, suddenly made public. And when a life that seemed aggressively normal, maybe even aggressively private, is suddenly ripped open by some shocking revelation, well, the platforms just amplify that exposure massively.
It feels like there's a rapid pipeline from tragedy to content now.
There really is. A shocking story breaks. And almost immediately, it's not just news anymore. It's being sliced and diced into dramatic TikToks. Here's what I think happened. Videos, complex timelines drawn up on Reddit threads, all designed for maximum engagement. The platforms incentivize this rapid consumption because these stories confirm a deep, almost universal anxiety.
And that seemed to fuel the conspiracy theories, too. This wasn't just passive consumption. People got actively involved, like deputizing themselves as investigators.
Right. There's this feeling, maybe, that if the community or the authorities miss the signs initially, then the online crowd needs to step in and solve it. There's a huge appetite for complexity there. People don't want the simple answer, which might just be that some people are very good liars.
That feels less satisfying, maybe.
Exactly. It feels too random, too uncontrollable. So online sleuths dive deep. They're digging through public records, property deeds, old social media posts, local news archives, anything to find that inconsistency, that aha moment that proves the neighbor was showing cracks all along. They need to find the hidden clue.
But that activity, it walks a really fine line, doesn't it? The analysis we saw called it surveillance creep.
Yeah, that's a good term for it. Where does genuine curiosity end and active digital snooping begin? People start feeling compelled, maybe even justified, in filming their neighbors, sharing little weird observations online, speculating wildly in forums. Suddenly, the person next door isn't just a neighbor. They're potential content, a potential suspect in this ongoing crowdsourced investigation.
It feels like a way to manage anxiety almost. Like, if I'm watching closely enough, I won't be caught off guard.
It is a coping mechanism, I think, externalizing the fear. If I can spot the flaw in their facade, then I must be safe myself. But the collective effect is, Well, it potentially erodes that basic assumption of good faith and privacy that a community needs to function. Every interaction becomes loaded.
This whole theme isn't exactly new in storytelling, though, is it? It feels very connected to certain types of fiction.
Oh, completely. This trend is basically the real-world viral version of Gothic domestic horror, or maybe suburban thrillers. Think about how enduringly popular stories are, where the danger isn't out there but right inside the home or next door. The quiet betrayal.
Like Desperate Housewives, maybe, on the more satirical end.
Sure, that show played with the idea of perfect suburban surfaces hiding dysfunction. But then you have darker stuff, like the show You or The Watcher, which really lean into that fear. The person who seems meticulously normal, even charming, is actually deeply dangerous. Fiction kind of primes us for this possibility, so when these real cases blow up, they feel like a validation of our darkest anxieties about who we live amongst.
And consuming these true crime stories, it serves a purpose beyond just morbid curiosity, right? The idea of catharsis came up.
It really does seem to function that way for many people. It's a way to process generalized, sort of free-floating anxiety about the unknown, about random threats. By focusing on a narrative where the evil was right there, in plain sight, it had a name, a face, a neat lawn. You feel like you're learning to spot the signs. It's like consuming the story as a way to inoculate yourself. I wouldn't have been fooled, is the subtext. I would have seen through that perfect facade.
Okay, so this intense engagement, the theories, the fiction parallels, it all points towards some broader societal reflections. It feels like more than just a scary story. It's holding up a mirror to how we live now. Let's dig into that safety illusion, especially around suburban aesthetics.
Yes, this came through really strongly in the analysis. It's maybe one of the most critical takeaways. Suburbia, with its whole visual language, the neat lawns, the similar house designs, the HOA rules about paint colors and trash cans.
Right, the enforced orderliness.
Exactly. That whole package is designed, intentionally or not, to signal safety. Automatic built-in security. We're deeply conditioned to equate that kind of physical order with social and moral order. But it's an illusion. Those aesthetics don't actually guarantee safety. They just create a very powerful feeling of safety, which can be dangerously misleading.
It's like the ultimate marketing campaign for peace of mind. If it looks safe, we stop looking harder.
Precisely. And the analysis suggested this facade, this focus on appearance, masks two really significant things. First, emotional distance. That's the root of the modern loneliness we talked about. And second, moral distance. When a community implicitly agrees to prioritize surface appearances over, authentic, sometimes messy human connection.
Yeah, it creates the perfect hiding place.
It really does. It becomes an optimal environment for someone living a double life to operate completely under the radar. Because the performance of perfection itself discourages anyone from looking too closely. Curiosity feels rude.
Which leads straight into that paradox of modern isolation, right? We're physically crammed together in housing development.
Yeah, sharing walls, sharing driveways, closer than ever before in history in some ways.
But we know less and less about the actual inner lives of the people right next to us.
Proximity definitely doesn't equal knowledge. In fact, sometimes that very closeness, especially in these planned communities, it almost increases the pressure to maintain the facade. It makes genuine connection harder, not easier. We stick to the safe scripts, nice weather, how about those Mets? Because it requires nothing emotionally and keeps everyone comfortably at arm's length. If everyone's busy polishing their own exterior, nobody's really checking the foundations.
And this is where the digital culture aspect has such a huge impact on how we process these things, especially empathy. When these neighbors and the awful things that happen become content, something gets lost, doesn't it?
Completely. The line between genuine human empathy and, well, voyeuristic consumption just dissolves incredibly quickly. The story shifts instantly. It stops being a community tragedy that might require, sustained compassion, maybe some difficult self-reflection for the community, and instead it becomes a spectacle. Something to be consumed quickly, judged instantly, shared for clicks and comments.
The focus changes from how do we support those affected, or how do we prevent this, to did you see the latest update? What's your theory?
Exactly. That emotional distance we see fostered by the facade in real life. It gets mirrored and massively amplified by the digital detachment when the story hits our screens. It becomes entertainment, not lived experience.
Underneath all this obsession, it feels like there's a deep anxiety about control, or the lack of it.
I think that's definitely part of it. We crave predictability, order, and the idea of danger that isn't external but internal, hidden within the community, maybe you're right next door, smiling at you. That's profoundly unsettling because it feels uncontrollable. You can put up cameras, get better locks, join Neighborhood Watch, but you can't really vet the secret thoughts or intentions of the person borrowing your ladder.
So where does that leave us? What's the sort of grounded, practical takeaway from analyzing this whole phenomenon?
Well, the crucial realization, the one that came through consistently in the analysis, is that real safety, it isn't built on those superficial things. It's not about having the most pristine lawn or living in the most expensive gated community or even just sticking to polite, empty greetings.
Those are just appearances.
Exactly. Real safety, the analysis suggests, requires something much more demanding. It requires authentic awareness. It means we might need to prioritize genuine human connection, even if it's sometimes awkward or messy, over the easy comfort of just assuming everything's fine because it looks fine.
So it's less about judging the perfection of the facade.
And more about trying to sense the authenticity behind it. It forces us to shift the question, not are they perfect, which is judging the outside, but maybe are they real? Are they authentic? Which is about actual human connection, however imperfect.
Because the hard truth this trend exposes is that a perfect hedge doesn't tell you anything about the person holding the clippers.
Not a thing. It just tells you they're good at trimming hedges. Ultimately, this whole perfect neighbor thing holds up a mirror. It asks us, are we so invested in maintaining this comforting illusion of safety that we actively choose not to see, that we stop looking closely at the people around us?
Wow, that's quite a thought to end on. This has been a really insightful, maybe slightly unsettling look into a trend that clearly touched a nerve about modern life, trust, and community. The whole psychology of fear and deception that the perfect neighbor narrative brought to the surface, it feels like something that will stick around, even after the specific viral moments fade.
I think you're right. And maybe the scariest part of a perfect neighbor isn't what they hide, it's how easily we stop looking.
Powerful stuff. Thank you so much for walking us through all that.
My pleasure. Always interesting to unpack these things.
Next time on Trending Unpacked, we're shifting gears completely. We move from quiet suburban streets to the heart of global intrigue with the Louvre Museum robbery, a story where high art, audacious crime, and enduring legend collide. Until then, stay curious.